All right. Hello, everybody. In this video, we're going to talk about what we're going to study in Chapter 4 here in the Fundamentals of Geometry. So Chapter 4 is about what are the characteristics of parallel lines? What does this knowledge allow us to do? And in the key learning, it talks about there are many pairs of angles. There are many pairs of angles formed by parallel lines and a transversal. Now, we can prove two lines are parallel knowing these types of angles. We also can prove two lines are parallel by looking at their slopes. So we have 4 lessons that we're going to be looking at that cover this material about parallel lines and transversals. So let's take a look at these 4 lessons. Let's start with the first one, Lesson 1. So why do we need to be consistent in describing the relationships among lines, segments, and planes? And the idea is by standardizing how we label things. That way people know what's going on. It doesn't change from place to place. By standardizing it, we can make it easier to recognize each part. Lines, planes, segments, which we've already studied this year. We talked about different ways to mark for lines, different ways to mark line segments. And we want to be able to see where they are located and how they relate to each other. So the first lesson, some pretty basics about parallel lines, parallel planes, and what we call skew lines. Now in the second lesson, lesson 4.2 and 4.3, we're going to combine those two. The essential question is, how are the angles created by parallel lines and transversals related to each other? We're going to see that many of the angle pairs are congruent. There are also pairs of angles that will be supplementary. So some will be congruent, some will be supplementary that add up to be 180. And look at all the vocabulary. There's alternate exterior, alternate interior angles, okay? Exterior, interior angles, corresponding angles, consecutive interior angles, and the word transversal. And then to the fourth lesson. Fourth lesson, how do we know if two lines are parallel? Well, we cannot go by looks alone, okay? We can use our knowledge of angles. So we're going to use the knowledge of angles that we learned over here to prove lines are parallel. So there's this parallel postulate. So in lesson 4, we'll be studying this parallel postulate. And then the last 2 lessons, lessons 5 and 6, how is graphing in algebra related to geometry? We're going to tie in some algebra to this, and we're going to be talking about the slope of a line. Will help us identify if it is parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So those are the things we're covering, and the vocabulary is slope, which I have covered up by my picture right there. So that's our plan for Chapter 4. It's all about parallel lines, different types of angles formed, and then how we can use those angles to prove lines are parallel. And then you look at slope. How does slope come into play with parallel lines and perpendicular lines?